Millionaires Are Made, the show where we believe that you can be a millionaire in all 6 aspects of health. Today's episode is going to be an exciting one. We are focusing on how to improve your intellectual health con español. So, while this episode will primarily be in English, there will be parts that some of our guests may respond or speak in Spanish, and we will try to translate them as much as possible. If you are a Spanish speaker, this is going to be your favorite episode ever, because we're talking about how to be smart with Spanish. Foreign languages are known to be super helpful on your intellectual health, and we're going to focus on the number 2 most widely spoken language by numbers of countries in the world. If you have never seen Millionaires Are Made, this is the show built on the fundamental belief that every person you meet knows something you don't, and there's something to learn from everyone in this big, beautiful world. We share tips every week to improve your physical health, your mental health, your social health, spiritual health, financial health, and as we already said, today is your intellectual health. And our topic is Spanish. Outside of English, Spanish is the most widely spoken. Mandarin may have the most people, but Spanish is in more countries around the world. It's an important language, and we're going to try to dive in on how to be smart by learning Spanish and possibly speaking some Spanish. In the spirit of authenticity, we don't talk about tips or advice before the show starts, so I have no idea what advice our guests are going to give. They are all going to talk about their own life journey and how they believe to improve your intellectual health with Spanish. If you are watching this, audience, this is an interactive show. Please, danos las preguntas. Give us your questions, give us your comments, ask them live, ask them in Spanish, ask them in English. We don't care. We will put our guests on the hot seat and make them answer these questions. So please make sure to comment. On that note, if you are following us in socials, we give you a shout out every week. This one might be for you. Today, we are shouting out Maria Edese on Facebook, Red Dean on Instagram, Kelly Doris on TikTok, Holistic Fitness New York on YouTube. Thank you so much for following. If you want to be shouted out on one of our shows, make sure you follow us and you may get the chance. Woohoo! If you want to be a guest on our show, we would love to have guests that actually show up when they sign up. That would be fantastic. We're dropping the link right now. If you have a little piece of advice, which I already know you do, come be a guest, say hi, and share your knowledge with the world to grow. On the other hand, if you're going through something and you're struggling a little, maybe Duolingo isn't helping you so well with your Spanish and you need to learn a little more, let us know. We will go out and find 3 awesome guests, find 3 tips or pieces of advice to help you get through your hump in life. And if you love what we do, please share, subscribe, follow, whatever it is on whatever medium, so we can keep growing and keep sharing knowledge for the world. And if you ever want to talk to me one-on-one, I do offer free growth consultations. I love sharing all the knowledge that I have. I spend pretty much my whole life learning and stealing knowledge from people like the guests you'll see today. And last but not least, this show's sponsors. Thank you so much. Our sponsors help us keep going and growing. First off, who is also a guest on our show today, is Samir Dosani, who is a certified health and nutrition coach specializing in the prevention and reversal of chronic diseases, many of which you didn't think could be reversed. He does it. He's getting his PhD in anthropology right now in South Africa, and also just learned he speaks, I think, 11 languages, and one of them happens to be Spanish. Thank goodness. So he will be our first guest. Go check him out. Check his website. Follow him on Insta. Let's show him some support. Second sponsor of the day, we have Craig Sadkowski. Craig is a human behaviorist and mentor who helps entrepreneurs to discover their true identity, their purpose, and achieve growth in business and life. Check him out on the website right now. We also are sponsored by Amanda Cullum, who is passionate about holistic health, combining science, faith, and frequency-charged nutrition. Something you definitely should look into to help everyone stay calm, aligned, and thrive. And our last sponsor is Kim Groshek, a 2-time international best-selling author and speaker who helps CEOs maximize focus, energy, and health with 30 years of industry expertise. It's going to be a good show today. Without further ado, I guess it's guest out, Samir. ¿Quién eres?
Todo bien, você? Hi, how are you, sir? ¿Y tú?
I'm good. Estoy bien, estoy bien. Dinos, ¿quién eres? Who are you?
So, so I am Samir Dasani. I'm a health coach. Your audience probably knows me by now. But one of the things they don't know about me most likely is that I speak many languages. So I started with French, and which I learned both in high school, but then by studying in Canada and Quebec at a time when Quebec was going through its own independence movement. And then I also studied German, I studied Arabic, I studied Urdu. Urdu is very similar to spoken Hindi, so I speak that as well. And then I've traveled all over the world and I've picked up some languages, including Thai, Indonesian, Spanish, and Portuguese, and some Italian.
All right, so the next 14 language episodes, you will see Samir featured in and saying phrases in 11 languages. All right, so you traveled the world and lived in multiple places, and a lot of that is how you got your language knowledge. Does that sound correct?
Absolutely correct. And what I've learned is that, it's really cool being able so being sort of exposed to two languages from a very young age. So my parents, they really only spoke to us in English, but there were other languages around the house. My parents spoke to each other in Urdu sometimes. And what you learn is you can, if you only learn one language, and I think most folks in the US only learn one language, the brain is such you only there's like a reification. A table is a table, right? Whereas in if you're exposed to multiple languages, the table could be a table, or it could be a table in French, or it could be a mesa in mesa in Spanish, or whatever it is, right? So when you have that, you can distinguish between the abstract name and the concrete thing, the table, right? And
Ooh,
that
that's
really the way that you can sort of put that in perspective is amazing. And once you have that flexibility, then I wouldn't say Chinese is one of the languages I speak, but when I'm in China for more than a couple of weeks, I can at least converse with taxi drivers and people at restaurants and so on, right? So you have that flexibility and you can kind of pick things up more easily. Does that make sense?
yes. But I think you're trying to tell us advice, and I haven't asked for that yet, Samir.
Sorry, rushing ahead.
Samir, if I wanted to improve my intellectual health with Spanish, what tiny piece of advice would you give me?
Like anything else, just spend a few minutes a day on it. And the way I did it, with my first second language that I sort of got fluent in, was actually using a television show that I was familiar with and watching some of it in that language. So for me, it was The Simpsons dubbed into Canadian French, which is the funniest thing in the whole world. And this was the late 90s. Everyone knew The Simpsons backwards and forwards. And because the dubbing was like a couple of years after, so I could watch the French dubbed or the Spanish dubbed episodes, and I already knew that episode because I'd already seen it, a couple times, or maybe more than a couple times. So I knew the jokes in English, and I was learning them again in French, and it was a great way to learn a language. But the other thing I just say is keep in mind that as you get older, that brain flexibility becomes even more important, and we do want to do things like learning a new language, learning a new musical instrument. It's really important to keep that brain health strong.
100% agree. Learning another language is I don't know. I could go on for years about that. Spanish is awesome though. I mean, it's super important in the U.S. Right? There's a large Spanish-speaking population. I mean, in my city where I'm from, Denver, you have to have Spanish to do a lot of the things. Down here in the islands, actually, oddly enough, we don't speak a lot of Spanish at all, and we're right next to Puerto Rico. Who knows? Things are weird. Samir, so you told us a little bit about it. Where on your life journey did you learn this advice?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the biggest learning for me was really in Quebec, in Montreal, because it was such a. I was there at a time when language politics were really at their height. Here in South Africa as well, there are 20 official languages, 19 or 20 official languages, and language politics are a really big thing. And people feel the need to be spoken to in their home language or in their, and it's a perfectly understandable need. And for me, someone who grew up in the US, really where almost everyone is monolingual, I would say it's super important to have that flexibility and be able to do stuff. You're talking about different cities in the US. I mean, probably the place where I had to learn the most Spanish was in Miami. Just to get stuff done, I was organizing for a little while. I didn't spend a lot of time in Miami. I spent like a week there, but I was doing work for various organizations that were sort of doing grassroots organizing work. And you just couldn't, English was just of no use, no value at all, zero. It was Spanish and maybe French in some of the Haitian quarters, but English was like not used for the 2 weeks I was doing work in Miami. So there are cities like that still in the U.S.
Definitely, and I think English is, I don't know. I know in the U.S. I think English is becoming less and less necessary or prominent. I think worldwide, I think there's still almost every country wants their citizens to know English. So it's interesting, right? As you travel, you see a lot of people coming to you and they're like, I want to practice my English. I want to learn English. You know, depending on what country you're in, it's it's fascinating. All right, Samir, we're gonna move on to our next guest, and we'll bring you out for the round robin. Next up, we've got Sonia. Sonia, ¿quién eres?
Hola, soy Sonia Montenegro. You want to do Spanish, English, a little bit of both?
If you do Spanish, just do a slight translation to English. Pero
I'll,
los
I'll
dos
just,
está
I'll,
bien.
okay, I'll just do English, okay, just so we can save some time. But my name is Sonia Montenegro. I'm actually originally from Mexico, so Spanish was my primary language. Now, I came here when I was little, when I was 12 years old. So for me, it was actually the opposite, learning the English language. But it has been an incredible experience. I'm a financial educator. I love anything that has to do with finances, and I love to go out there and share with the community, because there's a lot of education that it's not in the school system. So just going out there and talking to people, sharing how they can improve their um, future in their finances, it's amazing.
I love it. I love it. Now say it.
And yeah, I
Habla,
do.
háblanos en español.
Español, okay, español. También, I do have a experience in real estate. Tuve la oportunidad de hacer un poquito de todo tipo de estrategia en lo que es los bienes raíces, como hacer wholesaling, hoteling, flips and flip, todo eso. También tengo experiencia con eso y también me parece fascinante. Es algo donde he aprendido bastante.
Perfecto. Okay. Otra pregunta. Another question. Sonia, if I wanted to improve my intellectual health with Spanish con español, what tiny piece of advice would you give me?
I would say read books, because even for me, being my primary language, when you're actually reading, you actually, putting the extra work in, adding, more thinking to it. So reading, it has definitely helped me. That's something that I would recommend. And not only in Spanish, really in every, I mean, I don't speak 11 languages, but also in English. I love to read because when I read, everything hits different, and not only one time. Sometimes read the same book maybe one, two, three, four times until maybe the fourth time it will hit different. So definitivamente leer libros, eso ayuda bastante.
Leer libros en dos idiomas o en el otro idioma o qué?
Bueno, para el español, definitivamente español, porque para español, aunque uno habla español, cuando uno lee, aprende aún más. Hay palabras que uno siempre está aprendiendo constantemente. Eso siempre, para expandir el conocimiento, yo siempre creo que leer es bien importante.
Y otra vez en inglés.
Well, both, English and Spanish. But even in Spanish, even if it's your primary language, I always recommend that you read, because you always learn additional words. You expand your vocabulary when you read books.
Perfect. Okay, one last question. Where on your life journey, tell us a little bit more about it, did you learn this piece of advice?
I did. It actually happened around maybe 5, 6 years ago, when I used to work in the corporate world, like banks. I worked for Bank of America since 2007. So when you're actually working, you really don't have that much time to read. You're more like in a routine every day, doing the same thing over and over again. But when you start your own business and become an entrepreneur, that's when you have more time to you have to work in yourself. You have to, like you said, this is not, to become an entrepreneur, it's not just about growing one part. You have to go all, like, spiritual, personal development, finances, health, physical, I mean, everything. And that's when I actually started when I started my journey, that's when I actually started reading books. and I just find them so fast. I mean, you find books everywhere, in my room, in my office, in my living room, everywhere. Now, I'm still trying to work on finish them, because I used to have the habit of starting reading a book, and I never finished the book. But now I'm working on it. Every book I start, I have to finish it. But that's where I kind of discovered how fascinating it is to read, and I'm addicted to books now.
Do you read mostly in Spanish or mostly in English?
Both, both. I
Back and
order.
forth.
My husband, he's more into Spanish, so I order both. I both English and Spanish, and we both try to read. But I will say 50 and 50.
Very cool.
50 and
Awesome.
50.
Okay, Sonia, we're going to move on to our next guest and we'll bring you out for the round robin in just a few minutes. Next up, we have Jeremy. Jeremy, who are you?
I am me. I'm the only Jeremy Roderick on the internet, which is helpful for finding me. And I'm essentially a men's consultant, and we talk about all the sticky, scary stuff and the things that get guys stuck, right? They hit a ceiling, and what got you here won't get you there. Cool. Let's remove that ceiling. Let's remove that. Let's make that ceiling a new floor. How's that? And then how quickly can we get there to change that BS, the belief system, the story, to change the game, to change the results? Like it's a simple little flow, but a lot of times we can't see what we can't see because when you're in the hole, you can't grab yourself by the scruff of the neck and pull yourself out. So that's kind of the stuff I do, and that requires a lot of mental flexibility, a lot of emotional flexibility. Which you messaged me this morning, you're like, hey, and I'm all like, hey, and here we are, because yeah, flexibility super important, super importante, and you can learn that stuff by one of the things, languages stretch what your mind is capable of doing and how your network is built inside your brain and how things connect together. So yeah, I love this kind of stuff.
Well, tell me this. If I wanted to improve my intellectual health with Spanish, what tiny piece of advice would you give me?
Yeah, what I would say is start looking at all of the language, all the words that match between the two languages, because you start to look at a lot of European languages. They come from heavily influenced by the Romans, Romance languages, and so you begin to start seeing these words that run across, and the ability to see the commonalities and connections at the source. You can begin to see and understand, oh, this took this little direction, this went this little direction, and we start talking cross cultural stuff. Nuance is so important, because in some cultures, if you get straight down to business, they're never doing business with you because you don't care about me as a person. We got to talk about family first. We got to talk about all these things around it to build that know, like, and trust factor. And it's early businessmen in the 80s, they were struggling internationally because they were just, let's get down to business, let's make this deal happen. You want this, I want that, let's make it go. And they were getting deals just like on paper it was perfect. What, you'd be stupid to say no because the cultural understanding wasn't there. Deal was nerfed before they even started. And so look for that where the languages begin to blend over each other. Look for those, they're not really loaner words because a lot of English and a lot of Spanish come from similar sources. And cool. So go find that and find those connection points. It's a really fascinating journey into where we all came from, because the whole world's connected, y'all.
That's a true statement. All right, Jeremy, where on your life journey did you learn this advice?
I grew up in Turkey and Saudi and went to Europe, so Italy and Spain and Germany and Greece, all before I was 8 years old. So I've just been like, yeah, like I was raised in Turkey and Saudi, merhaba, is hello in Turkish, right? It's also goodbye in Turkish, but it's like it's I just having lots of ways to say stuff and lots of ways to get there was sort of what I would was bathed in from the rip, because military family, traveling the world, we got exposed to a lot of stuff. So I had actually been in more countries of the world than some of the teachers that I had in school in the US had been in states of the United States. So I'm 8, 9 years old, and I've been in more countries than they've been states. It was a really interesting frame of reference to like, oh, you haven't, well, that's different. Like that's my normal is, yeah, you just no, you haven't been to Greece and Spain and Italy and Germany and like it's like get out of here with that mess, kid. What are you talking about? So yeah, this is why if you can get your kids and travel internationally, it is the most amazing
Oh
thing
man,
because you can talk all kinds of history, take them to places, walk the Parthenon. Whoa, it's like real.
that's awesome. Awesome, Jeremy. Well, we're gonna move on to our next section. Thank you so much. We'll bring you back out in just a second. Do, 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 do. Awesome. Three awesome guests. We're going to bring them all out for a round robin. Bring out Samir and Sonia and Jeremy. Dun, dun, dun. Awesome, guys. Well, it's been great so far. Let's keep talking. Um, I guess my little background with Spanish, I pretty much learned it when I was in elementary school. My parents forced it on me. And so I learned, I remember helping out. I remember like being in like fifth grade and helping out classmates that didn't speak English. I have a degree in Spanish. I've been to Spain multiple times. But somewhat like Samir, I'm fascinated with language and language families. I love learning what family they're supposed to be in, the interestingness of the families. Yeah, language family super fascinating to me. I love how it came, how it got built, how they got separated. And Spanish is obviously the first foreign language I learned. Samir, did you say Spanish was your first one too?
I would say
No.
it's one of the first ones I was exposed to, but that's like through Sesame Street. So in terms of formal education, no, French was my first one.
Perfect. So let's go over some tips. Samir, quickly refresh what your tip is for us.
Watch shows you know dubbed into Spanish if you want to learn Spanish.
That is so true. That's a one thing we do a lot with, and I guess my Spanish/Italian is you start off watching the show in English with your foreign language subtitles. As you learn and get better, you switch it and you watch it in Spanish and have English subtitles. So if you are learning another language, that could be a good way. And there's some awesome TV shows in foreign countries, really good ones. Once you start learning, right, Sonia?
Yes, I actually have a friend. She's from Europe, and she's married to a Mexican guy, but she actually learned Spanish through a TV show, and her Spanish is really good. She
That
never
is
went to school for to learn it, but everything through a show. So I know it works because I'm impressed how good her Spanish is, and just from watching that show. So very
that's
interesting.
awesome. I have a good buddy. Actually, he's passed now with sad news. But back when I lived in Italy, I met him, and his English he learned through Eminem songs. Eminem the rapper. He would listen to Eminem and start learning English, and he was musical, so he played a lot of music. And his name was Liborio, but he learned all his English through Eminem songs. It's wild. It's funny to hear. Okay, Sonia, what are your thoughts on Samir's tip? Obviously, you support it, I think, right?
Yes, absolutely, definitely a great advice. Great advice because I'm telling you, it's someone that I it's very close to me, and that's how she learned Spanish. So I know it works. It works.
Jeremy, your thoughts on Samir's tip?
Yeah, yeah, because Bluey is a fantastic show for this because they've got so many languages and it's a simple thing.
What show
If
is
you
that?
watch shows, Bluey, the story about the little dog and her sister, and it's an Australian show for kids, but it's got a lot of like nested family values in it. But they have one episode they did in in English, and the one character speaks French. Well, if you play it in French, everybody's speaking French, and that character speaks English. Like it's really great, and it's the one thing I would say is watch shows that are younger because the language is simpler to follow and it's simpler to put together. So, don't start with like the Wall Street reporting in another language. Like go kids stuff because think about our brain,
Yeah,
we pick up languages before 7, so it's like start simple and then you can build. So Elmo internationally, like Sesame Street, if you watch it on YouTube, you can get it in different languages. It's a real great because you gotta immerse yourself in hearing the language.
that's actually a really good tip. I never thought about watching kids shows in other languages, but obviously, yeah, you don't want to watch Wall Street Journal where they're using like high level vocabulary, and you're like, if they have
Fiduciary
pictures, maybe you
terms.
can get it, but yeah, they're talking about like revolutions and political parties, and you're like, I don't fucking know. Yeah, kids shows in a foreign language, smart, very smart. Um, Sonia, did you give us your tip? Can you refresh what your tip was for us?
Books, reading books,
Oh,
books.
okay. On that note, we do have a question from the audience. ¿Cuál es tu programa de televisión favorito? Anyone can answer that, as well as talking about books.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the right person. I'm not a pop culture kind of person. I'm watching actually a Turkish drama called The Magnificent Century, which is absolutely amazing, and I'm using it to learn some Turkish. My wife sort of got me onto it. But yeah, that's not a very helpful question, I'm afraid. I'm also a big Trekkie. I watch old Trek reruns.
Big
That's about it.
Trekkie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever read? I mean, I read lots of books in foreign languages. Samir, do you ever read books in other languages?
I do, but I find it a bit challenging. So what I do, I did a philosophy degree. My first degree was in philosophy, and I had to read Hegel and Merleau-Ponty, and I wanted to read it in the original languages because I spoke German and French. But you keep a big dictionary with you, and yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world. But definitely when I'm reading someone, so like for example, I read a lot of Frantz Fanon, who's a psychologist and an African sort of post-colonial theoretician. So you can get a lot by reading him in English, but I do think in order to understand him, you have to read him in French. And reading similarly, reading some of the great poets, Pablo Neruda. Reading Pablo in English is fine, but reading him in Spanish is so much more powerful. So you do have to. I think reading writers in their native language is super important for me.
Jeremy, you ever read a book in another language?
I can read some Chinese, but I don't know how to say it, but I can read it because the Chinese is built out of ideas. So if you know the 40 base stems, you can kind of extrapolate the characters. So yeah, I can read some, but I haven't read anything like none of my language is at a good enough level that I can actually read and make stuff coherent. Somebody asked about do I speak Arabic? Gule gule, a little bit. My dad is fluent in Turkish, which is crazy when you see him to just hear him bust out Turkish because he was on a military mission there. So I just have a little bit of smatterings of Arabic and Turkish, unfortunately.
For me, I just started learning a little bit of Arabic, but for me, I guess the difficult part. So whenever I talked to like my professors in college, they all spoke like 3 or 4 languages, and I was like, all right, I'm studying Italian and Spanish, but I confuse them all the time.
Oh
I'll
my
just be saying
goodness.
like the first half is in Spanish, and then I'll like think of a word, and at the first I'll say it in Italian, and the rest of my sentence is in Italian, and then nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about. And so he always he always explained it. He'd be like, your mind is like a hallway, and you have these doors. You open the door, and it's all fluent Italian and this and that, and then you shut it, and you go to the next one, Spanish. I'm like,
Yeah,
bro, when I open it, it's an attic full of fucking random shit all over, and words here and here and here. And so I used to
Austin, this
go,
this is my life. Austin, can I tell a story?
yeah, do it.
So two stories, really quick ones. So one is that I was studying Urdu and Arabic in my second or third year in university at the same time. Now, the problem with studying those two specific languages at the same time, they have the same script, the Arabic script. There's some words that cross over, but the words may be different genders. They may have slightly different meanings. I mean, it was a complete disaster. I was very lucky to pass those classes. But then my second story is actually more interesting because I was sitting on a plane with a couple of older ladies looking like very traditional Indian ladies, and they were speaking mostly in French, but they would put some very Bhojpuri, like for people, like a specific dialect of Hindi was in there. And I was so confused. And they were gossiping about all the people on the plane. Now, the problem was they were sitting next to the one person who could actually understand every word that they were speaking. Because my Hindi is fluent and my French is also very fluent. So I was confused as hell. And before they were about to start gossiping about me, and I was like, look, ladies, I can understand you. But tell me what the hell's going on here? Because how is it that you're speaking such good French and such good Hindi at the same time? They said, no, this is our language. We call it Creole. Creole is just means a mix. But this
Right.
specific Creole was the native language of Mauritius. So there are places where like languages exist that you and they just totally weird. Half French, half Hindi. It was quite an experience, quite an eye opener.
Yeah, even in the
Yep.
Caribbean, each Creole is different. You know, you got the Haitian Creole, you got there's like a Belizean Creole, there's a Dominican Creole, and it's just like the big melting pot of all these languages. It's
One
fascinating.
of the challenges with languages is being able to make the phonemes and the structures in your mouth, because certain sounds,
Oh God.
like if you don't have the flexibility, so sometimes what you can do is if you can imagine the language, if you can create a certain type of feel inside your mouth, is one way to start compartmentalizing the languages, so that you take on kind of a persona. Because you think about German, like nobody has ever said beautiful German poetry. Like
Oh, I
German's a
disagree.
very structural blocked language. Right. But I come from a tech background, so when we talk about software stuff, the Germans are about as flexible as a brick. But it's like there's a very structured to it. So if you think about your body structure when you're speaking German or you're thinking German, if you can make yourself more solid, and then think about something like French, you can make yourself a little more softed or around those edges, because you can move and slide. And if you can begin to add some physicality into your linguistics, you can begin to put on those personas, and it gets easier to slide through and kind of keep that mental space between the languages, because not everybody's visual that they can say, oh, I have a door in my mind, or I have a palace in my mind that I can create.
Yeah,
So being able to
that's
slide into other modalities.
so. Let's bring this a little bit back to Spanish specifically and intellectual health. Um, so so English is the most widely spoken language, right? Almost every country has it as least as one of their top five official languages. Everyone agree with me on that? If you disagree, you can Google it and find a couple countries here and there, sure. But 80% of countries have the US in one of their top five official languages. Number two, though, is Spanish. I mean, Spanish is basically almost all of Latin America has Spanish as one of their top five official languages. South America has it. Um, where else, Sonia? Where else they speak Spanish? Obviously,
You
Spain.
know what? About 2 months ago, I was in Turkey actually, and I was very impressed how they speak more Spanish than English. Like they will,
Interesting.
they will see us and like, so where are you from? And so we're coming from the U.S., but we're actually originally from Mexico, and they will start talking to us in Spanish, and it was very interesting to see how they speak better Spanish than English. So that was very cool. And I haven't traveled as much as you, Jeremy, but so far I've been to Thailand, Dubai, and Turkey the last 2 years, and it has been an incredible experience. I feel that the way you think, the way you see people, the way you see cultures, it transforms the way you see everything. So definitely traveling, it's a must do. That's something that I am planning to do with my kids in the near future. But yeah, I think that was I wanted to share that because to me it was very interesting.
Yeah.
To learn
But
that.
Sonia, do you know where those Spanish speakers in Turkey are coming from? They are the
You know
descendant.
what? I think because they were in the local stores, maybe they learn from all the people that come to visit from all the because I mean most of them were from Turkey.
It's possible, but most of the Spanish speakers in a place like Istanbul are coming from the Reconquista, from the time when the Jews were expelled from Spain in the 15th and 16th
And
centuries.
and that could be that's where I was. I was in
Yeah,
Istanbul the whole time. So
yeah,
like that's probably why. Yeah.
yeah. But it's a fascinating history, right? So they've been Spanish has been in Turkey since 1500 something, right? And it's had a very strong presence there.
That's probably that explains why. But if for us, going in there, we were expecting to find,
Yeah.
and there were some people that that they couldn't speak English or Spanish, but there was a lot that could understand Spanish very well and speak it.
Hmm, hmm.
All
I
right, so
think
I've done a little bit of research as well. In the world, about 1.5 billion speak English, 1.1 speak Mandarin, which is mostly all in
China.
China and surrounding countries there. 600 million speak Hindi, which is going to be the third largest, and 560 speak Spanish. So Spanish is by people wise the fourth largest, but by official language wise the second largest. So it's a pretty important language to learn, and especially if you look through, like you guys were just talking about, right? Culture, history. Learning Spanish. It's not just learning these languages, but it's learning because you learn the people. And like Jeremy was talking about, you learn. Man, it's crazy how much the language structure, the language fluidity kind of like spills into the culture. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Jeremy was talking about that a little bit, how German's all rigid and French isn't. But it's crazy when you learn a language by default that starts learning their culture. And if you ever go there and learn that language in that country, man, it opens up. It's so much. Not only does just learning a foreign language make your brain smart, but learning about their culture and their history and how they interact and all that awesome stuff is just so much fun.
When you begin to start seeing in your own culture, like you can't see the fundamental assumptions in a system until you escape that system. So when you start learning
Yeah.
another language, you begin to literally repattern your brain. Your brain begins to rebuild. It stretches your malleability neurologically so that you gain more problem solving ability. You gain the ability to step out of yourself. So when you're having like the strong emotional moment, being able to speak another language, you can literally pull yourself into another frame of reference to look back on this perspective and, oh, maybe I don't need to be so uptight about that or so caught up in that. Right. I have clients in the Hispanic communities, and the whole concept of machismo. If you grow up in white bread America, you're not going to understand what machismo is. And so you get this woman who is super caliente, and she's like just this fire. But yeah, she's saying all this crazy stuff, but what does she really mean by that? And how is she calling you to step up and step in and be present and with love and respect, but very firmly tell her to shut the hell up and just go make me a sandwich. And like, how dare you? But then off she goes and she's making you a sandwich. And it's like, how the hell did that just work? And it's like, because she needs you to be a bigger container for her emotion. But if you grow up only in standard white bread America, what, that's disrespectful. And it's like, nah, she can handle you and handle you having a little bit of, a little bit of brass. You got to have some heat to match her. Because if you come in and, okay, honey, we don't need to use that kind of language, and we can just say what we need and what we want, she's gonna be like, "Pfft, like, I gotta go find me a real man. This is a little boy. Go away." And the passion dies in the relationship. And it's linguistical stuff. It's not that she's like disrespectful. She's just running hot, and you got to know how to match that.
Sonia, you're gonna have to comment on that.
No, I agree. I agree.
Oh,
Sometimes we do need that. I want to say, sometimes I do appreciate my husband telling me, hey, like chill, like, I'm not gonna use the words he used, but it kind of, like you said, it kind of wakes me up, like, holy, like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, I get it, he's right. So we need that, we need the masculine energy in our lives, because the feminine energy, and like you said, if you get all this gentle and everything, there has to be a combination, a balance of feminine and masculine energy. So yes, as a woman, I do agree with that. We do need that. We do need that
all right.
sometimes. Now it
Sonia.
depends. You have to know that, you have to know each other, and also the culture, because if you come, if you marry a different culture and you talk to them, I mean, you can traumatize a person, and that person will
Yeah.
never be the same. So it all depends who
Yeah.
you're talking to. In my case, we've been married for 18 years, dating for 20 years. So I know him very well. He knows me very well. He knows when I need he needs to tell me something.
Sonia,
Splash of cold water.
is he Mexican too?
He's also Mexican, yes.
Um, so with the two of you guys, so he was born in Mexico, and now you both live in America, correct?
Correct.
What? Let's try to figure out. Let's answer this question a little bit more. Intellectual health, Spanish, right? So how does helping Spanish, or how does speaking Spanish and English between both your cultures help you guys live your lives more intellectually? Does that make
Well,
sense?
that I think that's something that we are actually still working on, because when I started my entrepreneur journey and kind of going all these masterminds, networking, it was all non-Spanish, or it was everything was in English. He's still
Okay.
more into Spanish. Okay, so
Okay.
that actually it caused a little, some issues there, because I would go, he wouldn't understand why my mindset was changing. He didn't understand why I wanted to do the things that I wanted to do. So what I'm doing right now, two things. I'm doing more Spanish now, both of course, English and Spanish, but I'm actually pulling him with me so he can
Good.
come and be with me, because he didn't understand why I was doing the things that I was doing. So and of course now he's also learning a lot more English, so that also helps.
Very interesting. All right, guys, we got to wrap this up. So we have to do my favorite part of the show. We have to come up with a daily challenge to improve your intellectual health with Spanish. It must take less than 5 minutes a day. It must cost $0, and it must be available to anyone in the world from Spain to Mexico. What ideas do you guys have?
Bluey, 5 minutes in Spanish, en español, YouTube
Podcast.
or a
Say
podcast.
that again.
A podcast.
Oh, okay.
Sesame
to a-
Street on YouTube.
I was thinking
That's
Put
about
in your
that.
favorite language.
That's it's actually super effective. And bonus points if
That's
you
where
can
I
find
learned
the
peligro.
bilingual. But I was teaching my daughter French on using that as like a tutorial. It was very good. I mean, she learned French more quickly than than she would have in the classroom.
Let's make this.
I watched a part of Sesame Street back in the 1970s because I'm old enough for that, and it was a picture of kids roller skating, and there was a manhole cover that was open, and there was an owl, and they did the danger, and then later in the episode, peligro, and I remember the owl, whoo, peligro means danger. There you go. 40 freaking years later, still remember it.
All right, let's try to make this as fun as possible. Is it possible? There has to be. Can you use TikTok and do Sesame and Espanol, Sesame Street and Espanol, and watch their TikToks?
Let's take a look at TikTok. Let me just open it up here. So, do you want to do a Sesame Street from a particular country, like Sesame Street de Mexico?
Oh yeah, you could do Mexico. You could do. I mean, I guess pick your every day, do a new country, and let's watch five or six TikToks from that country. I'm thinking. I mean, obviously, we want to immerse in Spanish, right? So we want to do something with Spanish.
There's a lot. There's a lot on TikTok, like an unbelievable amount.
Perfect. That's what we wanted.
Pick one word a day and just add one Spanish word to your vocabulary every single day.
Okay,
and try to use
I like that
it
too.
like 10 times.
All right, so we're gonna pick a cool word and learn it in Spanish. Oh, this is gonna be tough. I know. I mean, yeah, there's definitely gotta be words out there I don't know. And learn it in Spanish. And I'm gonna say let's watch Sesame Street from
Reels.
a Spanish country. Yeah, Sesame Street Reels from a Spanish speaking country. Yeah, for 4 minutes, I guess, right?
Even most of these are like 30 seconds to a minute.
Should we also try? Yeah, I mean, I guess you could even or do a Duolingo lesson. I mean, then Duolingo at least makes you listen and speak and write and stuff. I mean, that's 5 minutes.
Listen. Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway for your audience is 5 minutes a day. Spend it focusing on Spanish in the next month. Here are some ideas of how to spend those 5 minutes. Learn a new word.
Yeah.
Go and check out a reel. Watch some Sesame Street.
Watch some Sesame Street and pick a word you like, so then you can start using it the rest of your life. Just like Jeremy with his 74 ways to say this door is weird. What was your phrase, Jeremy?
The door is
hold
made
on a
of
second.
soup.
I had it up. Yeah, I gotta go back. Hold on 1 second. This is the phrase you have to learn in every language. Because there we go. La puerta está hecha de sopa.
Oh, the door's made of soup.
That's a weird way to say that.
The door's made of soup. All right, daily challenge.
The whole point is make people go, what? No, that's the whole point.
Okay. Well, you were successful.
Oh my gosh. Okay, awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Daily challenge. Just pick a cool word or phrase that you like. Learn it in Spanish. Watch Sesame Street reels from a Spanish-speaking country and do a Duolingo lesson. Easy 5 minutes. Start learning, getting smarter, learning some Spanish. And I mean, especially if you live in the U.S., you'll see Spanish popping up all over the place. I mean, restaurants, stores, everywhere you'll see that. Depending on where you live, I mean, Spanish is all over, so you'll see it somewhere. Anyways, thank you guys so much. We're gonna wrap this up. I'll put you all backstage.
Muchas gracias,
And thank
Austin.
And thank you, audience, so much for watching another episode of Millions Are Made. I hope you learned a little bit about Spanish and how it can make you a little smarter with your intellectual health. We've got an awesome daily challenge. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to see what happens here. We're going to watch some Sesame Street reels in Spanish. We're going to do a little Duolingo lesson. If you haven't done it, it's a free app. You can learn thousands of languages, math, reading, all sorts of stuff. And then pick a cool word or phrase and learn it in Spanish. That's going to be a fun one. What's your favorite thing to say? Maybe it's a little slang, but you're going to have to go